Well, hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Certified Forgotten. We are still, as always, your podcast that talks about horror films with 10 or fewer reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. It's an arbitrary number. And I feel like over the last couple of weeks, we've had more conversations about how arbitrary that number is, as Rotten Tomatoes has introduced Verified Hot, their audience score that they're using to promote their movies. But you know what? In a world where all we're trying to do is figure out what qualifies as underseen or movies that deserve a little bit of a spotlight, 10 or fewer Rotten Tomatoes reviews will do us just fine. My name is Matt Monagle. I am one half of your Matt hosts. I am joined, as always, by my friend, by my partner in crime, by my fantasy football league mate. It's Matt Donato.
Hi, Matt. That's it. That's all I got. Just a
hi.
hi.
When I throw to you with that much buildup, you really gotta there's gotta be something there. You gotta give me a little something to run with.
I will dig a little deeper and say, as a film critic, fuck Rotten Tomatoes. I would just love to wake up and not have the industry trying to destroy my career every step of the fucking way. So fuck that audience score thing. Fuck that whole part of it. Yeah, fuck Rotten Tomatoes. That good?
Okay, that was a little hotter than I expected, but you know what? We averaged the two of them out and we find ourselves in a really happy medium. As always, for these episodes, we have two types of episodes we run. Every week we run an hour-long episode with a special guest. Every other week we run an episode of Uncertified, which talks about new releases. And if you're listening to this and if you read the synopsis and everything else, if it didn't just autoplay on you, this is our special guest week. We're going to spend an hour talking to a really, really cool writer, and we're going to dive into a movie that they've brought that they want to talk about, that we want to talk about too. So Donato, introductions are in order, please.
Yes, absolutely. This guest is coming to us from, number one, knowing their work. Number two, knowing Michael Varrati and a host of people who have talked about this person's work at length. So the primer was already there. I went to Midsummer Scream, got to see them participate in a wonderful, wonderful little, I guess panel is the right way to say that. And yeah, I was just like, hey, you want to come on the podcast? And it worked. So we are bringing on to the podcast Heather Petrocelli. I'm hoping I get that right with the Italian inflection.
Yes.
You have a fucking PhD, number one. And number two, you're the author of Queer for Fear, Horror Film, and The Queer Spectator. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate being here with you. And I'm like ready to talk about, I'm already at the point where I'm like, can we like just talk about the movie? But we'll do the proper way.
Yes. I'm sorry. We got to talk about you for a little bit.
Yeah. It's always like, I don't want to be perceived, but let's do it.
No, it's fine. Like the first 30 minutes are always the thing that everybody says like, oh, I don't know how to talk about myself. And then like 30 minutes have blown by and we've only like asked 2 questions and it was amazing and a great conversation. So this is the fun part for me. This is the part that I look forward to.
Also, I do want to say, like, our listeners do too as well. People think that they're here, the listeners. Wow, geez, I can't fucking talk. Are here for the second half, but we get comments all the time that are like, no, we're really into like that first half, because I think there is something to appreciating someone's work and knowing who they are as a professional. But then when you pull the veil away and like you actually see them as a human and how like hear how they got involved, it's so funny, and I love hearing that feedback of like, no, we love hearing about your guests. Like that's the coolest part.
All right. Well, I mean, just like it says on my screen, Lieutenant Fletcher had said, I'm like, oh, I don't want to talk about myself, but you'll ask me one question and they'll be like, okay, shut up. We have to talk about the movie now. So.
All right. Well, let's make you talk about yourself for a little bit then.
Okay, let's do it.
We're going to start, Heather, as we always do, which is talking about some of your earliest memories with horror. Donato and I have had this conversation with a lot of guests, and you may not remember the exact moment that you fell in love with horror. Maybe you do. That'd be really cool. I hope you do. But, it's such an interesting genre that has so many different winding roads to it. I'd love to know kind of what got you started and interested in this particular type of storytelling.
This might be a standard answer. Maybe it was The Wicked Witch of the West and her flying monkeys. It was.
You're the first. I think you are the first person to bring up The Wizard of Oz as like the formative horror experience.
Yeah, because I think I was really, really, really little, and I was just completely fascinated by both her and her flying monkeys doing her bidding. And I think it scared the crap out of me. Like it was one of those things that I was like, I think I was still potentially, toddler age when I first saw it. So That's like the like lightning bulb, like or the like, light bulb memory, like the flash memory of like that is when I first was like, "Ooh, there's something that feels different about this." And I'm like both scared of it and completely drawn to it.
Hmm.
And then, for however many years between, I always had this draw towards kind of the macabre, the dark, all of those things like you probably hear over and over and over again. And the first part of my life was spent in Brooklyn, New York, and when my family moved, we moved to Arizona, which was really very, very different,
Yeah.
and we didn't know anything about things called flash floods. So, there was a flash flood, like, really pretty quickly after we moved there, and we wound up being, evacuated and displaced into a giant gymnasium, and it was like this really surreal experience, and I remember walking around because it's just like pandemonium and chaos everywhere, and everyone's just like all the noise, and some like dude, I like wish I could find this dude. He's probably dead now, but like this dude set up a 16 millimeter projector in a room off of an auditorium at a school, and he projected Night of the Living Dead and then Pink Flamingos. And I was young and I saw both of them, and it was like that moment changed the course of my life.
Those feel like formative movies to be watching at a young age. Like those are like you can't go back kind of movies to watch and to like to get
Exactly.
their teeth into you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I like it's a joke, but it's like I feel like it literally altered my DNA. Like I was never the same person again, for better or for worse. So,
I'm I'm curious about, the connection when you started to realize that this was something you wanted to seek out, where you found yourself going, because we have a lot of, when it comes to film, and people have talked, as guests before, about their relationship to horror fiction too, authors they like, they grew up on Stephen King, they grew up on whatever. There's been a lot of people who've sort of talked about, the story you hear a lot, which is parents police movies, but they don't necessarily police books. So once you were sort of like, I'm scared and I don't hate it, and there are these things that I want to explore a little bit more, were you a video store kid? Were you a like, you know, movie theater 3 nights a week kind of kid? How did you find yourself going back to that well?
I was yeah, all of the above. I was a kid who completely and totally was obsessed with video stores and just looking at every cover, which when we get to our movie, that was the first that's how I found the movie. And I was one of those kids, typical Gen X kid, latchkey kid, single parent. My mom was working and we used movie theaters as babysitters.
Mm.
So this was back in the day when the rep houses really would do double and triple features. So I would just always go and I had like if there was something that was on the darker gothic-y horror side, that was always first choice.
And did you, I assume, writing about this stuff or like putting your own thoughts down about it came a little bit later?
Yes. So the reason I'm drawn to horror, the reason like the way I've like parsed it out more now as an adult, but I think I was feeling it as a kid was that I came out at a really young age in the 80s, in the mid to early 80s, and that was a time when it was like, I mean, I got it was not like it's like I like joke about how it wasn't smart of me to come out. I had no choice, but also sometimes I'm like, why did I tell people in junior high school this in the early 80s? Like
Yeah.
what a dum dum in Arizona. So it was I had that part of me that I wasn't supposed to be, or I wasn't, once the bullying started, I was like, oh, okay, no one likes this part. But I was also raised like I identify now as kind of as post-binary, but I was raised a girl, and to like horror in the like 70s and 80s, like that was like totally also there was something wrong with me
Hmm.
because at the time only boys watched like horror was a boys genre. I mean, of course it wasn't, but it was, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So it's for me, my queerness and my love of horror are inseparable because I found relief in horror in seeing the other, and I found relief in horror in seeing survival through terrible circumstances.
Were there any characters like early along the way? Like obviously we know how it came about with you saying Pink Flamingos, and your origin is very unique. But as you started to watch more horror movies, and you're talking about now finding yourself in them, were there certain characters that like you gravitated towards that like really helped you pull together and be like, this is who I see myself in?
Well, of course, my answer is gonna be, like, also a little bit slightly annoying in the sense that there's a fluidity because some like, take so I loved Nightmare on Elm Street when I was a teen, loved it.
Mhm.
And sometimes I was totally Freddy, and I was like, "I'm gonna kill all you motherfuckers," and sometimes I was fully Nancy, and I was like Nancy was such a resourceful, smart final girl, and I totally was, like, really into that. Like, I was, like, one of those ones like, I was a teenager when 3 came out, and when she dies, I'm like like, literally crying in the theater. Like, so Nancy I think Nancy would probably be the first, like, final girl that I felt very, like, attached to and would had a like, picture from a, like, cutout magazine on my wall. But I also had Freddie, so
And I know that, it's interesting talking about coming out at a very young age, talking about, watching films that were as informed by horror as they were, again, queer film and horror film kind of side by side from the very beginning for you. A lot of the conversations we have about horror now, especially when we look at 80s films, are about sort of reclaiming elements of it, right? Like, I think of Nightmare on Elm Street 2, right, as a perfect example of that, where we can kind of go back a little bit and say, like, this was always regarded in such a way, but we're revisiting it and we're, building a narrative around it about what it wanted to be and what it meant to us as audience members. So I'm curious, there's so many films of the 80s and the 90s that we go back and we're like, we gave it maybe like a queer reading charitably at the time, but now it's like cemented as part of a horror queer canon. For a lot of the films that you were sort of watching in real time, was that something you were having to navigate? The notion of like, oh, there's like a character who's gay on the margins, or there's a character who's playing with gender identity on the margins of the film. Did that feel like you're like, that's great, I'm excited about that, or did that feel like something where you're like, well, this is not enough for me, but it's what I'm getting from kind of the horror movies that I'm watching and seeing in theaters?
I think it was enough for me at the time because I grew up in an age where, like, I didn't like, honestly, a young version of me would never, ever, ever expected like what it is now to be a possibility. Even though there's like a whole bunch of fuckery going on right now and has
Mm-hmm.
been, but like I still like the thing like gay marriage. It's not that like I mean, I'm not gonna get into like the politics of it, but like that was like never in a million years did I ever think that that was a possibility of anything that would happen. So I think that queer people get really good at reading, coding, right? It's like queer coding, and you just read into everything. I mean, there's literally probably hundreds of books written about that kind of stuff. And seeing, like, in the final girl character, like her, like I'm gonna keep referring to her as a final girl because I do feel like now we have final survivors, and it doesn't matter the gender as much,
Yeah.
and it's not always singular. But an important component of, like, the Carol Clover Final Girl iteration was that they were always kinda tomboyish, always on the skirts of their own communities, like, they were outsiders within their communities. So, that was enough for me. Like, just seeing it or Frankenstein's monster was enough for me because
Mm.
he didn't like, society made him a monster. He was just created, but society made him a monster. So, all of those things, those were it was enough because I didn't dare to dream that I would see our era of explicitly queer horror. Even though, like, at the time, when I would go see things like Fright Night, I was like, "This is really gay."
Yeah.
Like, and I
I was
love it.
I was just gonna ask, I'm like, as you're living that in real time and having those reactions to these movies in real time, were there any like instances that stuck out in your head where you had to like turn to friends and be like, "No, this is super queer." Like, what do you?
Oh, both Fright Nights. Both Fright Nights. I
Yes.
think I was in high school for both of them, and I was like, "Oh my god,
Amazing.
these are so gay." Like, "You do not see how gay this is?" And they're like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, first of all, like, in the first one, like, it just we could go on for like an hour and a half just on the queerness of like just that, but those were the ones that I would turn to my straight high school friends and be like, uh, "Are we seeing 2 different movies? Because I think it's, like, not even coded." They're like, "It's not gay." And I'm like, "Well, then, uh?"
Because
It's
like
like
I'll admit I was been on the opposite side of those early in my years and like early in my teens and having to have like that one friend be like, "No, no, you don't see that." And I'm like, "Oh, I get it now. Yeah, okay, I get it now."
yeah, yeah, it's like and then Fright Night 2 is just like it comes out and I'm like, "Well, we'll never be as gay." And then, like, the moment Belle shows up, you're like, "What?" I mean, even without Belle, it would still be very queer to me. So I think that was the first one that, like, or actually, no, probably even before Fright Night when I first saw Hellraiser.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I was like, "What is happening?" Like, Hellraiser was one of those movies that very much, it opened up my understanding of horror because you have to remember, like, when you're young, you're still young, you don't know the full expanse of everything. I didn't know international horror the way I know it now, even though I had seen
Mhm.
some international horror films. So, I mean, Hellraiser is technically international, but, it's like one of those things where Hellraiser and the mixing of pleasure and pain in that way really did, like, my head felt like I was like, "Yes, whatever this is, more of this, please." And then, like, that franchise takes you on a journey.
And the conversation we're having kind of about, what you're seeing compared to what your peers were seeing, I think that plugs in to the next question I want to ask, which is, as you were going through your own education, a lot of your work, famously your book, is focused not on the films themselves, but on the communities, on the people that are watching them and what their relationship to movies says about their own life experiences. And through that, what the movies have to say. I'm fascinated by that because I have a master's degree in film studies. I spent a lot of time with like a lot of graduate students, and the idea of turning the camera or turning the lens not on the film, not even back on yourself, but on the people that are in the metaphorical movie theater around you, was something that I just didn't see a lot of people taking to as their discipline or their area of focus. So I want to ask how you came to start to focus your work on the notion of looking at the audience and their relationship to the horror movie rather than the movie itself, you and the movie itself, etc.
To be blunt, it's like, imagine having conversations, like, for me, even, like, 40 years ago with people and being like, talking about what you saw in a movie and them seeing something completely different. I totally come from the school of thought where every film is a Rorschach test in a way. Like, you see
Mm.
what you wanna see, and that's the beauty to film for me, and it's why I have a deep appreciation for what I call contextual criticism that, like, takes it somewhere new. It doesn't just try to tell me if a movie is good or bad, because I don't believe in good or bad when it comes to film. So, in that experience of, like, not having people, like, feeling kind of always like, "Why do I always see something different? Like, why am I always understanding this film differently than everybody else around me?" And because I have, like, especially in this day and age when I started doing my PhD in, like, I started kind of in earnest in 2016 after the presidential elections here, and I I had had an experience in the '90s where when I moved to San Francisco, I became friends with someone who's a drag queen named Peaches Christ, and there was a thing called Midnight Mass. And that first time, I think it was Suspiria was the first movie I went to at Midnight Mass the first year. Like, there was, like, a spaghetti eating contest. It was ridiculous. But sitting in that audience with mostly queer people watching the film, it was like lightning bolts hitting my body, like, over and over and over again. Because I was like, "Oh my god, this room," like, they all understand the movie the way I do. We're laughing at the same parts. We're like, it just felt completely like a different experience.
Mhm.
So from that moment, I knew that, like, I was less interested in the film object and doing any film analysis, and I was interested in what happens for queer people when they're watching horror alone with a few people or in a theater. Does that answer the question?
It does. And I want to ask. This is me geeking out from my graduate studies too. I want to ask a little bit about the live theatrical experience, the indexical experience that you focus on in your work, because I think that's another thing that gets lost a lot in academic conversation about film is the like, oh, you watch a movie and how you watch it, it's a textual analysis, that's kind of like the focus of it. But I love the emphasis that you also put on that live experience and the settings in which people watch it too. So how has that, you talk a little bit about that lightning bolt moment, but how have you come to dig even deeper into some of those like shared spaces and those film screenings and things like that are an important part of what you write?
It's really slightly bittersweet, sad. I just had a conversation earlier today with someone where I was, like, kind of having to reconcile with the fact that these theatrical experiences mean so much to me, but our theatrical, like, the monopolies that are happening in exhibition and even in production the if you are not in a very large town, like, I think both of you are probably pretty safe in your 2 respective towns. I'm not safe. It's like
Yeah.
things that come here. So, the theatrical experience, I feel, is under threat in a way that I never also thought I would ever experience in my life. Like, I'm like someone in 2012 when they announced they were gonna stop making celluloid, I cried. I, like, literally cried. Like, to me, there's a magic in film. Digital can do great things. There's a magic that happens in film that I think is irreplaceable. Like, it's just its own thing. So when it comes to really thinking about the theatrical experience and the shared experience of being able to have how the energy of a theater changes how you actually receive a film and your experience of that film, that's the best of humanity for me. Like, being in a theater where everyone is genuinely scared and then that laugh comes after the, like, shock of whatever scare just happened, or if we're going to
Mhm.
see a comedy and everyone laughing together, like, that's how I find it helps my misanthropic ways, let's put it that way. And I find that really under threat, and I find it also, when I was in LA for Midsummer, I went to go see Longlegs in the theater, and it was $25.50, and I said, "Excuse me?" I said, "No, no, it's just me." I'm just going they're
Yeah.
like, "Yeah," and I said, "But I'm here for a matinee." They're like, "That is the matinee," and I said, "How do you survive here?" So, above and beyond how production has shifted with all of the whatever conversation we wanna get in with how the studios control exhibition these days, just there's a barrier also to going to the theater for a lot of people because, like, I would not be seeing all the movies I'd wanna see in LA if it was $25.50 a pop at a matinee. So, I try to work with people to figure out alternatives in community spaces to still show films where people can still gather together and have that, like, to be obnoxious, that phenomenological experience together that
Mhm.
is bonding and that shifts how you actually experience that film. Because I also think that film we have relationships with these products. I can watch certain films, like, I've seen Rocky Horror, like, I don't even wanna I don't even know how many times, like, 3 digits,
Yeah.
and every experience is a different experience.
I'm just letting y'all go with your academic thoughts. Like, this is Mongols time. Like, I usually get to have fun with my guests and friends and stuff like that. But every once in a while, we get like a true academic on, and I let to get him just go wild. So like, I'm just here listening.
It is
Well,
it is wild. We don't normally get to have somebody that comes from an academic background that wants to talk about something like Death Spa, which is sort of the best of both of our worlds. So it is quite a treat. If you haven't picked up on it already, we're very excited to have you here for a multitude of reasons, but it's also because the podcast is divided into like the perfect 30 minutes for me and the perfect 30 minutes for Donato, which is a lot of fun.
yeah, I am curious, like, to throw that question back to both of you. Like, how do you feel about? I mean, you clearly both love film. I would say, like, to be obnoxious, we're all cinephiles. Like, whatever, you know. Like, how do you feel about the state of things? How do you feel about how? I obviously I'm older than both of you, but like, even with your lifetimes, how do you feel how things have shifted, and what does seeing something in a theater mean to you these days?
I mean, there's definitely a shift in even thinking about when I was in high school, and we were the friends who would go every Thursday night to whatever midnight movie was showing, and it didn't matter what was coming out that week. If it was Toy Story 3, if it was a horror movie, if it was, it didn't matter. We were seeing the new big release because it's like what you just said. We love movies, so we were high school kids who could easily afford it, who could go every week, and it wasn't a big deal. Candy, popcorn was all of how much more money, and that experience has the quality has just fucking diminished so greatly. I don't want to sound too privileged, but at the same time, like, I'm a film critic, so I get to go to press screenings. And what is like that is highlighted even more the fact that when I go to a press screening and I'm sitting with other critics, like, we are all there to watch the movie, do our jobs, and it's silent, it's perfect, it's the atmosphere to watch a movie in. And then the few times, like, I got to go watch Afraid or AFAI, whatever the hell they're calling it, on Friday, and so I've got to go do that in a public screening because there's no critics one for that, shockingly. And every time I have to do something like that, it's just glaringly obvious all the problems with theatrical, and whether that's people sneaking in and like sneaking a bunch of like contraband shit in that's super distracting, or talking through the entire movie, Uh, one time, some guy tried to fight me in the raid. It was crazy. Like, shit is insane. Like, that's a story from another day. I didn't do anything wrong, by the way. That was not something I did. But it's just impossible to go into that theatrical environment in a public setting at this point. And number one, pay fucking $100 if you have a family, between food, concessions, all that shit. You're just out of pocket so crazy now. And then to have that experience be of the level that I have been experiencing lately, and maybe that's an LA New York thing, but I just, every time there's something obnoxious, every time there's something, like, I was trying to watch, I forget what last, oh, Trap, and the guy 2 seats down from me didn't want to be there. Like, obviously his girlfriend dragged him there, and like, she was like super into the movie, and he's just got a water bottle in between his legs the whole movie, and he's just like banging back and forth and like doing all this, like, just insane
I would
shit.
have like, yeah, yeah, I will say I did put forward a very utopian aspect of the phenomenological experience of like watching films. People are fucking unhinged these days. And I think that like they were kind of already getting unhinged before the pandemic, but the pandemic made everyone feral wild animals and they all think that they're in their fucking living room. And I do want to do a hat tip too. Yes, like uh, I probably couldn't do my study in earnest if I was like taking out any kind of identity marker. I would probably never do this kind of study with like the general population because I have not been to a movie in a long time where someone hasn't made me want to throttle them. So,
Yeah. And those poor, I mean, I've managed a movie theater for years. I did that for 7 years. You're asking a lot of a 17-year-old to come in and be like, can you stop talking, please? Or I'm going to have to kick you out. Like, it's not happening. Like, I'm sorry, kid. Like, I appreciate, and I've been the one to tell my staff, like, listen, if they push back, it just kind of is what it is. It's not worth anybody getting hurt over. But, without trying to be too doom and gloom about public spaces, that's just sort of a lot of, it's a microcosm for everything that's happening kind of across the board where social norms are eroding. And I thankfully have the ability to tune out a lot depending on, the circumstances and where I need to be. Others that I tend to watch movies with are not so fortunate. And so it's a much bigger distraction for them. But if I have to choose between somebody talking through my movie and, some usher making minimum wage, getting their ass kicked because they tried to enforce theater policy, it's just sort of like, I get it. It is what it is. I'm like, at a draft house, at least maybe there's some rules about that, but like at a Cinemark, I'm not gonna get somebody into a fight at a Cinemark because I was like, oh, Alien Romulus should be quiet. Like, I try and pick and choose my battles a little bit better than that.
But I mean, like, the business side of it too is just eroding as well. The monopoly
Yeah.
aspect you said before, it's hard to get, like, I guess excited is the word, but I generally do like studio movies. Like, I'm not going into something being like it has to be an indie for it to be good or some shit like that. Like,
yeah,
I'm
no.
open to all film, but I have stopped getting overexcited about certain types of movies at this point, and the way that studio film has evolved to be about the bottom line and to be about, I don't want to. I'm not going to say it's never been about that. Of course, it's always been about money. It's always been about making profit. But I think studios were more willing to take risks in prior decades, years, maybe even as, like the 2000s. Even we were taking risks. So like, I have just felt like the overall just the overall studio approach has just become too coddled and too just padded.
Yeah.
And unless they know they can turn that profit or get the right star to get in there, that's all they're banking on. They're not banking on the quality itself. It's just about what they can crank out. I mean, like, look at fucking Borderlands. That was churn and burn bullshit. Like, that was literally catered to no one at the end of the day after they chopped it to shit, and they just put a movie out to hope they could recoup enough from the Borderlands fans. And like, that is so fucking disgusting and toxic to me. I fucking hate that.
Yeah, no, it's like one of the I live in a really small town, so it's like I have a relationship with both of the programmers where I'm like, "Hey, will you make sure you try to get this for me?" For Borderlands, I wanted to see it. I have like a really contentious relationship with Eli Roth, but
Sure.
it's one of those things where I
Fair.
just wanted to see it because of a lot of the actors in it. I blinked and it was gone. I literally had to look it up, and I was like, "Wait, where, like, what happened?" And then I saw that it got pulled. So I don't know. I don't yeah, the streaming numbers are so kind of obfuscated. I don't even know, like, is that ever gonna make back anything? Is that no, it's not, right? No. Okay.
I can't imagine. Listen, Donato, and I say this with all the love in my heart. You know I say this with all the love in my heart. You somehow simultaneously exist in a world where you are both a snob and a trash panda when it comes to cinema, and I love that about you so much. I don't know how you do that, but like it should be a paradox, but I love that about you.
I feel like maybe we should just be friends then, because that's like literally like I have to explain people. They're like, well, you have your PhD in film and like you only. I'm like, oh no, you have no idea what a trash panda I am. I literally spent like this week watching like terrible movies from China that like where the CGI is like the worst ever, and I love that. Or I was watching like Slaughterhouse, but
Fucking
but
love Slaughterhouse.
We're
That
not a
shit
fan.
it
rules.
is so good.
It's so good. More people need to be talking about Slaughterhouse. That's
I mean, I should have brought Slaughterhouse. I should like go look up its Rotten Tomatoes right
it
now.
doesn't fit because I've already tried to sneak it in.
It has more than 10 critical reviews.
I could have sworn it did.
It has a lot. The last time we checked, it actually has a lot.
That's really impressive.
Because it was, I think, a pandemic movie, and so
okay. So everyone's like,
everybody covered it.
Yeah.
They're right about something.
Totally. So I do feel very seen with someone who has like high and low taste.
Well, I can't think of a better fucking transition talking about high and low taste for us to talk about today's movie. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Death Spa. It is what it says on the tin. We'll be right back. Hey there, listeners. Just a friendly reminder that you can sign up for our Patreon at patreon.com/certifiedforgotten. We have a free tier where you can sign up and get our weekly newsletter, and nothing else is required other than a name and an email address. And we have some additional paid tiers for those who want to watch our monthly video recaps, participate in our Slack, get up close and personal with myself and Donato in the Certified Forgotten community as the two of us sort of dunk on each other in public. It's what we do. But again, that address is patreon.com/certifiedforgotten. Sign up today. We'll see you soon. Okay, welcome back. So this week we are going to be talking about Death Spa, which is a 1988 thriller, horror film, sci-fi film, fantasy, a couple other things from director Michael Fisher. And sometimes I write synopses for these, but I was poking around and I found a bit of a description that I really liked from the Loft Cinema in Tucson, Arizona, which feels appropriate given our guests' past places where they've lived. So I'm actually going to read what the programmers of the Loft Cinema in Tucson wrote. Somehow combining the short-lived 80s aerobic exploitation genre with elements of supernatural horror and slasher hijinks, the campy, candy-colored catastrophe known as Death Spa offers up a schlocky grab bag of insanity that manages to encompass both a vengeful witch and a homicidal fitness center in the same movie. If you crave muscle-building mayhem involving such demon-possessed gym equipment as deadly diving boards, nasty Nautilus machines, and terrifying treadmills, not to mention unflattering short shorts, frequent group showering, and an apparent ban on exercise bras, then get yourself a membership at Death Spa where the workouts will really kill you. I don't know who wrote that. They didn't attribute that to any particular programmer. That's such a fucking good write-up. Shout out to the Loft Cinema in Tucson. You did well. So Heather, let's start with you. This was your pick. This was the movie you brought on the show. I know Donato was fucking over the moon that you picked this one, but what made this be the movie that you wanted to talk about today?
I think it's one of those movies that I get shocked at how many people haven't seen it. It's like it's on lots of people's lists. I've had like so many people be like, yeah, it's on my list. I totally just haven't gotten to it yet, but it's been on my list for the last 2 decades. And I'm like, this is just pure joy. Like to me, this movie is pure joy. I did not look through every film that you've ever featured on Certified Forgotten, but I was actually trying to pick between Killer Workout and Death Spa. But because like Rhonda and Killer Workout, like chef's kiss, love her forever, would die for her. But there's just like something so, as that write-up said, there's something so over the top and delectable about Death Spa. If you watch this and you don't like it, I just don't think we can be friends.
Yeah, I love that we anchored the conversation talking about the cinematic experience, because when Donato was like, oh, our guest Heather picked Death Spa, I was like, I fucking seen that movie. I've never seen that movie. And I couldn't remember where I saw it. And so I went back to my letterbox and was trying to like look through a little bit. I saw it for the first time in 2016 at Dismember the Alamo, which is their Halloween movie marathon. They did it at all, or at least a bunch of different Alamo locations, but that particular one was at the Yonkers location in New York. And so I saw this for the first time in a theatrical setting with a live crowd that was like 3 movies into a 5 or 6 movie deal. And I gave it a 3.5 stars out of 5. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, not in any way to knock the movie, but like that was the Kool-Aid. I had a really, really good time watching this movie the first time. Partially, I think because of that, the experience of watching it in a group setting is just absolutely unmatched. So I love that you brought that up, Heather, because this is one of the first times where archival stuff I can say I saw it in a theater as a repertory screening first, and then I went back and watched it at home. Usually it's the other way around.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love that that was the first time you saw it. Was at a, like, probably sold out theater. It's one of those films also where giving it a rating, this movie doesn't need ratings.
Very true.
Like, it's above a rating. It's just because it is what it is, right? Like, if you start to parse it apart and try to, like, literally, like, kind of, like, deconstruct it for film analysis, don't do that. Why would you ever do that to this movie?
Yeah, this is a
Sorry.
post review cinema, I think is what this is.
Yes, yes, I think so. From a movie made in, like, 1987, it is. It's like and, like, kinda like that, like, the write-up from Tucson. It's just when I start to think about all the things that happen in it, I actually become slightly, like, amazed that they could cram all of that in because there's, like, 5 different movies going on, and then there's the most ridiculous things, maybe, like, a reanimated frozen fish death, like, A+,
Mm-hmm.
no notes.
And like that happening in the context of the what we thought was AI first, like going haywire, because you're going like, okay, like AI is the villain here. They're gonna Skynet the shit out of it. It's the lift. It's down. It's all that stuff.
Yeah,
And then no,
we're running the risk of getting a little typecast here on the
we
podcast.
really
This is
are.
like 2 of our last 3 guest episodes have been about like haunted machines, basically between this and down, and I love that for us. But I was like, ooh, how long can we keep that going?
But it's funny how the film uses that kind of as a mask to make you think that's what it's about, and then no, the fucking evil fish comes out of nowhere. Like a detective's just stuck in the freezer, and all the food starts coming alive, and I'm like, that's not AI. Like that's not how this works. What is happening? And it's one of those bonkers off the wall movies that fits my Demon Wind loving heart. Like that's the one of Demon Wind is one of my favorite bullshit
Yes,
movies.
yes, yes, yes,
5 out of 5, and I get so much of that in Death Spa. It's a little more like honestly, it's more well made because they knew what they were doing at least, and they knew what they were going for. But even just the first reveal of looking at the entire name of the gym, and then the
Oh,
lightning
yes.
strikes, and all the neon letters go out except for the ones that spell Death Spot. I'm like, oh yeah, we're at baseline 3 out of 5. There's no way this can be a bad movie. Let's go.
100% agree with you. 100%. Like when that lightning strikes. Also, I have like a weird thing for like 80s lightning or electricity, like the effect. I'm like, when it hits and then you have the death spot with like the kind of neon noise, you're like, oh, I am ready for this roller coaster. And then it is just a roller coaster. The weird thing about Death Spa, if I was going to be critical, but there's no need for me to be critical, is that Michael, our I guess our protagonist is like such a milk toast, but like Michael is like so boring and like I don't know. Maybe they thought I don't, who is that guy? Do we know him? Do I know? Should I know that actor?
No, I do not believe we
No.
should
I
know.
feel like he's like Jason Patrick's like uglier cousin or something. So it's just one of those things that Michael is just so like. Sorry, I'm just like literally thinking in the movie in my head, and I'm like thinking of the moment where like all the tiles try to kill them in the over hot gratuitous titty shower scene. The tiles are trying to kill him. They get out. He's like, here's 3 months of free, like here's like, 3 free months. And then, hey, you want to have a threesome? And I'm just like, every girl's trying to bed this dude. And I'm like, he's so
Yeah.
boring. So
I
that's
was
my, that,
like, that's half the dialogue is literally just him being like, yeah, I'll get to you later. And it's like, all right, like, cool. I guess this
exactly.
guy he works here just to do that. That's what his job
He
is.
owns it. Doesn't he own the whole thing?
He
Isn't it just
does.
him and
He
the
does.
other? Yeah.
Sorry.
What
Yeah.
is that? What is it's like the TikTok, the Twitter meme about like this girl sobbing about how her heart's been broken, and it's just some guy. Like that is absolutely like Michael is just some guy, and we're
Yes.
supposed to like the most believable part of the movie is somebody who's vindictive enough. This is a huge spoiler for the end of it, where they're basically like, I'm bored and I want you in hell with me. Come on, let's go. Like, that is where Michael belongs. And it's a little disappointing that that's not where he ends up.
I
But
mean, but we're just gonna say, I know you said spoilers are fine because this movie
yep,
has
they
been
are.
out for like forever. But like, I'm also like, at the very, very, very end, it does technically end with Catherine basically being like, what does she say? Something like, basically,
Nice.
she's not dead.
Yeah.
She's
I
not
forget
giving
what
up.
yeah, she
Like,
she
nice
does do
try
the
or
thing
No,
where
not
something.
she's
yes,
like,
nice try, Michael, or something where
Yeah.
she's coming back. And I'm sorry, like anytime, like when you close your eyes and you just actually start like seeing the movie in your head, it's like, also I'm thinking about how like the whole weird, so it's like a ghost possession twin cyst movie, like that whole like where did that scene come from and how is any of this working? But it doesn't matter, right? It's like
it doesn't, because to think about the movie, then you would have to think about the fact that David, so we have the film's villain, let's say antagonist, however you want to describe him, is possessed by the ghost of his dead sister, who is also Michael's dead lover. And we have to believe that David is appearing as a woman to multiple people, because like there are interactions where that one guy who's on the control set, and he's monitoring the party surveillance cameras or whatever. And David walks in, but he sees the sister. But then all of a sudden we cut later and it's just David sitting there in the chair. That doesn't make sense because of what people are seeing. Like
you're
to me,
right.
it's
I see. Yeah, I have
yeah.
never actually like, thought that through because I'm like, well, no, because David's just gay. Because like I don't know, because the actor. Did
Mm-hmm.
you are you old enough to ever watch Square Pegs?
No,
Uh,
I did not.
But he's
I'm
Johnny's.
a
Like,
Star Trek 2 kind of person myself
okay,
personally.
well, yeah.
That's
So he Kirk's kid?
he's Kirk's kid in
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
totally. And like he's like Johnny Slash from that. And then also, actually, since we talked about Fright Night, he's also like the friend in Fright Night too. Um, and then he died of AIDS related complications right after this movie. So it actually ends very sadly. But
It
you're
does.
right. Uh, I've never actually pieced together like how you're seeing Catherine versus David in each scene and what we're supposed to think that they see and what they do see. See, I think we're overthinking it. It's got like
Exactly.
reanimated frozen fish. We don't care.
Exactly. Like that's the point of it. If you try to think about that too much, it doesn't hold together. But as
Yeah.
you're watching the experience, it's kind of one of those, I am so into this, it doesn't matter. And not all movies can pull that off. I don't want to say that any movie that goes wild enough I will give my entire attention. There are plenty of examples of movies that are just bad. And that's it. Like they are just poorly written, they're poorly put together, but the way in which Death Spa embodies so much I love about an 80s slasher that just stopped giving a fuck about anything. It's beautiful in that, because it does exactly model it. You said it before. You tap the sign. This is what it is. Like, it is
Yeah.
Death Spa, and it finds all those really fun, energetic ways to use gym equipment and to use the atmosphere of like sweaty bodies and all this stuff, and just make the sleaziest, horniest slasher possible. Like it set out to be nothing but pure popcorn entertainment, and it delivers on that. So I can't hate it that much, because it is so confident in what it is doing. And maybe that's to a fault, but it's not,
No,
because
no,
they get
no,
away
it's
with it.
not. No, no, yeah, no. It's a really very pretty movie. It's like all that like kind of
Yeah.
giallo lighting throughout it too, especially towards the end where it just kind of goes full giallo lighting. Uh,
But I want to back up for just a second here, because it's hard not to talk about the movie and to focus on the third act, which is where it goes full Peter Jackson and is just like more Meet the Feebles Peter Jackson than anything else, but like full funhouse kind of like mayhem and gore. But the movie actually, I think, does part of what struck me on the rewatch is they do a pretty decent job of sort of setting this up as like something that is grounded is the wrong word, right? But like there is an internal logic to this world. This gym, the notion of a fully automated gym is kind of like a fun late 80s techno paranoia thing that they're playing with. Like it doesn't feel, for the first two acts primarily, it doesn't feel like it's exploitation, right? It doesn't feel like they ripped it off, in a 30-day shoot in order to capitalize, as much as all the sound bites from the director are basically like gyms were big. I mean, I don't know. it doesn't feel like that kind of movie. It doesn't feel like it was designed to just be like, gym culture is big, let's make fun of it. There's dance numbers, there's like real thought that goes into the production design and the staging and the way that the gym is laid out. That thing has like, it's 20 feet deep and also like 100 yards. Like there are hidden rooms upon hidden rooms.
Yes.
It's kind of a marvel of design, and the characters are doing some interesting things. And I think that's part of what I respond to it, is it has this sincerity that Donato and I often talk about when it comes to like horror comedy or this kind of stuff. It's sincere in what it's trying to do. It is not winking. It is not nodding. It is not telegraphing to the audience, we know what we are. We're doing some B movie horror thing. It is kind of like a blood rage, a chopping mall. Like it's setting out to do. It's like, yeah, we have a campy idea, but my God, we're going to execute this as fucking hard as we can, and we're going to make it work. And that's part of what I really like about it, is the fact that it isn't trying to be cheap. It's not trying to cash in. They're like, well, they're like, this guy's wife died, and like, when is it appropriate for him to start dating again? And he has to work with the brother because the brother's the only person that understands the computer system, and they fucking hate each other because the brother understandably holds him responsible. There's like a foundation to this that makes when it goes off the rails in the third act, I think, so much more fun, because they tried to give it something to stand up on.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I think I wrote about it when I like did a post on, like, I have this project I'm doing where I'm watching all these films from my PhD work that were listed as favorite horror films, and Death Spa was on the list. So when I rewatched it, when I wrote about it, I was like, actually, there is a critique of kind of cis heteronormativity and like the things that you're supposed to be following. Like when David jumps up at one point, she's like, well, she never wanted the kid. And like literally the reason she became disabled was because in childbirth, something, I don't know, she became disabled in childbirth. We'll put it that way. Something, I forget what they say. They say something. And then it's like, it's got this weird kind of dated kind of discourse around disability, but at the same time, as someone now who's been like disabled by COVID, it's also has this very delicious response of vengeance from a disabled person. And I
Mm-hmm.
took it very seriously. I wrote about it. Like, I can send it to you guys. Like, I was very earnest. I was like, oh, this is actually really a great like disability revenge story where Catherine will get all you motherfuckers.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. I think there is something that winds up being so great like this has to have a level of earnestness, because they did have to believe in what they were doing in a real way. So
Yeah. And it only works if you put, part of it is just the attention and care they put into the gym. I'm going to look, Donato, you live in LA. Would you work out at that gym?
all
I
that
mean,
gyration, come on.
I was
Come on,
gonna say, I don't
buddy.
know how I couldn't based on that.
Yeah, I
Just
mean,
trying to,
I've seen your army of tank tops. You would fit like
All
yes,
your short
completely in.
shorts.
You got short shorts and tank tops, dude. You are meant to work out
dude.
every day
I
like
just got
that.
a thigh tattoo. I got to show this off. I'm
Oh my
going
god,
There you
even
you
go.
shorter now.
definitely
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
There you go.
Yes.
But I mean, it is the funny thing though. Like, I did go to LA Fitness for a while pre-pandemic. Like when I moved out here for that first almost, over half a year, I was going to an LA Fitness, and doing that versus New York gyms, like the LA gym is a different kind of beast. It is 100% everything you think it is. I never had any bad experiences, but you can just tell things are a little different, and everyone is there who is gorgeous, and like it is more intimidating. So I'm happy doing my home routine now. I don't need to be in a gym for my purposes at this point, but it is funny watching it and like, oh no, they're really in tune with like LA workout culture. And there's a lot of like I think there's like the roasting of masculinity too in here,
Yes.
especially
Yes.
aggressively, actually, I should say, because it's as subtle as the Lieutenant Fletcher, who is there basically investigating. Like that's his job. He's always eating fast food, whether it's like a cheeseburger or a slice of pizza. And then he goes to the party at the end of the movie, which is the third act. There's this Mardi Gras party to hopefully bring in new people and spread the name about the gym. And he just gets to the door. He's like, yeah, like a lot of hot girls here. And his partner just looks at him like, yeah, you think they're going to go for you? And like, he confidently, he's like, yeah, like, why not? Like, he is this schlub of a dude, but it is that thing of like, yeah, guys don't have to take care of themselves. They could just get the hot girl and shit like that. And the other side of it is so many of the dudes working out are just the biggest stereotypes, whether it's nerdy Freddy, who's trying to do too much weight and almost kills himself. Thank God for Ken Forey. or the death of the, I forget what machine it is, but he's got his arms
Yeah.
out and it's the weights
Yeah.
machine basically, and the weights just keep piling up, and like again, how many guys would be like, yeah, more weight, more weight, more weight, and like no, this guy's like, no, less weight, less weight. Like there's a lot of fun to be had with that shit.
And there's also the arc, which is sort of my favorite, is that to his credit, complete non-entity of a human being, Michael, is the first one to say, "Let's shut the gym down." And it's his lawyer slash investor who's sort of like, "We've seen a 30% increase in membership since you went fully automated. So like, let's let this play out a little bit." I was like, "Oh, okay, great." Sad that that part is like, that is the 80s version of the mayor from Jaws, right? Is just sort of like, well, let's see where membership goes. Let's keep it automated for a little bit. It's totally fine. Nothing bad is going to happen here.
I'm trying to think about there was something that you had just said about life with long COVID. I'm like, it was right there. Now it's gone.
Was
Sorry.
it the was the masculinity aspect of it? Was it the
Well, no, I totally agree. I
yeah?
think that totally plays in. Like when I say it's critiquing cis heteronormativity, it's like it's kind of tackling at it at both ends, where it's just like. And now that I'm like thinking about Michael, I'm like, oh, maybe I need to reevaluate my like Michael is milquetoast. Maybe he necessarily needs to be in a way to have the message come through. But also, now are we like putting too much onto this movie? Like,
Yeah, I don't know how much we
it's
need
like,
to reclaim Michael. I'll say that, having
yeah,
just watched it again.
I just watched it again too. I've seen it a bunch of times. And speaking of the just the space of the gym, this was the first time I've probably seen the movie somewhere at least like probably 10 times or something. It was the first time I realized each station, like it spells out star body. I didn't know that until today, where I was like, oh, so
Just
maybe
one
I
of
should.
the very thoughtful little tricks they throw in there.
Yeah.
Star Body Gym. Just I again, the fact that they made it spell death spot, just perfect. Just perfect.
It's perfect. I
I,
am still struggling. I like the first time you see it, and it's basically a strip mall, and then like at some point they're like, "We have an Olympic-sized pool in here," and you're like, "Fucking how? Where? How? What is the?" I need somebody. I would go online if I could find the production designer and be like, "Draw me a fucking map of this gym's layout, please, please, for the love of God. I need to know what this looks like."
one of the listeners, please do this. I want to see. I'm like suspension of disbelief. It's okay. It's all in there. It's all in there.
But I
One
do
of the
want to
things
give. Well, I was going to say, Donato, I want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about the gore in here too, because we've done podcast episodes on, we've definitely, I don't want to say the name of your movie again. It's already been mentioned in the podcast. Let's just say that we've
Demon
all
Wind.
right, fine. We've talked about some good goopy slasher, monster gore type stuff. I think the thing that you have to know about this movie, the thing that's going to hook people on watching this movie, is that it does not fucking sell you short when it comes to people when the bodies start piling up in the last little bit. So, for people that are only like, I don't care about anything, I don't want cultural commentary, I don't want depictions of masculinity, I just want 80s gore. We'll start with Donato, but I'd love to hear both of you kind of talk about where this sort of sits in like 80s goop canon for you.
I mean, it sits very high in 80s goop canon because it takes goop very seriously. It delivers on the bodily torture. It doesn't. When you see the deaths and you think about them in the sense of, yeah, it's gym equipment, that would suck. Or like, even if you're just at the gym and you're looking at a piece of equipment going like, ah, man, it really gets sucked to like get stuck in that machine or something. And you imagine how bad it could be. Death Spa takes that imagination and goes off the wall because there are two specific things I want to point out. Number one, it is Fletcher's death when he gets killed by the frozen fish that's come to life.
Mm-hmm.
And it holds on his throat after it's been gnawed open by this fish. And there's the most unsettling gurgling noise. Like it's just this like like a fountain just kind of spewing blood and doing the gurgle. Is it the best effect? No. But does it go the extra mile to put that sound design on top of it and make it that gross? Yeah, absolutely. So like that was one of my favorites. And then you have the sauna scene, and there's a guy in there, and basically the heat starts getting ratcheted up, and the wood boards on the side on all the walls start caving in on them, and like one hits him and it just his head explodes and like porridge comes out, like literally it's like the consistency of like blood and porridge, and it just starts pouring out of him, and it's so gross, and I'm like, that doesn't make sense as well, but also holy fuck, that's such a fun gore gag. Like they take every step to break bones, they take every step to get the kills done right. And once again, that is that confidence, that commitment that I was talking about before, because think back on how many 80 slashers had the ambition to pull off effects they could not,
Mhm.
where something like Death Spa knows how paramount these effects are in an 80s slasher. And as both of you have said prior, like it delivers. Oh, it's here.
Yeah, it's like, the back to the Tucson review because it was such a good one, it's like they use the word schlocky, it's like perfect schlocky effects in the sense but, like, I adore them, and literally ooey gooey bodies, spurting fountains of blood. I think there were multiple exploding heads, and, like, when
Yeah.
they explode, like, they, like, they're full, like, kinda like it's all there, and you see it all on the camera, and it all goes back, but it's super schlocky. Oh, the, like, the
The
old
mirror.
The
yeah, oh
mirror,
my god, the
yeah,
mirror. Oh,
the mirror scene.
yeah, like, the old hand in the blender routine. It's
I
like
love how the cop can't pull the blender off. Like the
yeah.
blender is like sucking on her hand and she can't get it out. But yeah, I thank you for bringing up the mirror scene because it's so simple. It's just a woman goes in front of a mirror and it explodes. Not just like a little like poof. It is a massive like seismic explosion, and you see the core, basically you see the prosthetic, you see the fake body on camera, and it's like it's get blasted with like three shotguns, like not even one. It just gets
Yeah.
eviscerated. Body parts are flying everywhere, and it's so funny. Like that is one of my favorite.
And it's
Yeah.
the hero kill too, because
Yes.
the rest of the gym has no idea because they're doing their party. That is the kill that reveals to everybody else that there are actually people dying at the gym. Is the mirror shotgun blast thing, and so it's little things like that where they're like, eventually everybody's going to find out. So which kill is going to be the kill that like reveals this to everybody, and they save it for absolutely the right one. It's the best kill in the movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to go up against a reanimated frozen fish, but, like, it is an exploding head, so it
Correct.
is it's also then it leads to like, this movie really is just so chock full of things because then we have, like, the, like, trope of the burning building with people locked inside, and then we have a stampede that happens where, like, there's that one guy where everyone's, like, it's all, like, squishy. He's, like, compressing down as a stampede overing him.
Which is
It
legitimately kind of actually scary. Like that
Oh,
is
no, totally.
that stuff works. Yeah.
Yeah, it also plays a little bit differently in our, like, current life.
Yep.
Like there was a moment when I was watching it today, I was like, "Oh, that reminds me of that news headline a few years back. That's not good."
It's
So
not to bring up Eli Roth again, but Thanksgiving, like the
Yeah.
beginning of
Oh,
Thanksgiving when it
yes.
is the Black Friday stuff, and it's that feel, it's that social realism of being in large groups again that we have now. And at the time, yeah, like in the 80s or stuff, that is just a gag. That is just, oh, it's a mob kind of stuff like that. But now I see that, and it's like compartmentalizing even more like anxiety I have now about being in groups and just hating that shit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I mean, it's like one of those things too where, like, haunted, possessed, ghosty person aside, it's like it is. It's like a horrifying scene. Everyone's smushed up. So we'll take it away from there, and we'll give a moment also because I feel like Sergeant Stone needs a shout out
Oh
because
yeah.
she also has like these great moments. Like I fucking love that moment when David says something about Miss, and then she's like leans down. She's like Sergeant.
Yep.
I was like, oh, this is like this character's gonna. This is actually like the hero of the character. Yeah, like, ACAB. Yeah, yeah, but that's the hero.
Yeah.
So,
And just unloads a clip into what's left of
oh
David
yeah,
is like not fucking around anymore. Fuck this computer shit. Bum, 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 bum. It's like
yeah,
it's very good.
And
so
then it
good.
gets back up again, and like it has that
Mhm.
perfect beat of just like, ah, I'm back. No, 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 like 7 more shots.
Truly
Yes.
some Sam Raimi puppets there. Yeah, it's wild. Heather, I want to ask you one more within the context of this film. I think like a smart question or a earnest question. We'll put it this way. We've talked about the character of David slash Catherine. You have obviously written a lot about kind of queer theory and audience reception of it. And I'm curious with the for 80s talking about the notion of these kind of two gender identities that live in this one body. Is there space for Death Spa to be kind of like reclaimed, reappropriated, rediscussed, reanalyzed in the way that we've seen a lot of movies kind of get over the years?
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of films that were sort of like playing with these really bad concepts of like Freudian duality and self identity in the 80s that have kind of like, oh, actually, these are real things that we want to toy with now. So before we kind of wrap up the conversation, I do want to ask: is there a space for Death Spa to be a movie that that grad school kids write about like relentlessly about the way that it plays with gender?
Yes, I definitely think that there is room for and entire papers, term papers, maybe even like a master's thesis, maybe even like part of a dissertation. I think that you can definitely I think that it's actually I think there are moments of it being textually queer. Like, I think that that whole "I'm beta, you're VHS" is coded queerness. Like, there's a whole full message in that statement from that man to that woman. And I think David was explicitly queer when he like is spying on everybody, and at one point they go to like that one muscle dude, and he effectively says like, well, I can't build upon a perfection, you know.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. But with that weird twin sis thing, it it it's like the way you can write about Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde. Like, they're different kinds of things, but there's this duality coming together. There's a murderousness, and there's also an agency in each of the characters. So the answer is absolutely, and I think that there are so many ways that the film as a whole can be written about as just literally being queer.
I think that we've given you hopefully some sort of a foothold, not either of you, but you the listener, you at home. We've given you a million different like notches in the rock wall for you to start climbing. So I think whether you are ready for puppets with tomato soup, if you are ready for, proto screenwriter attempts at exploring gender identity in 80s horror, if you are ready for critiques of 80s Reaganomics, if like there's a lot of different inroads that kind of get you to this movie. And that gets us to the last question that I want to ask both of you. And I'm actually going to start with Donato because I know that you probably got a few more things you want to work into this piece. I want to give you space to talk about it too. We always end the podcast episode by saying, how does this movie earn, its audience? And I think of something like this, Death Spa is very, very, very similar in terms of what it's trying to do with something like Chopping Mall. But Chopping Mall is a classic. It is, every Shudder docu-series has clips from Chopping Mall in it. But something like Death Spa isn't quite in that same sort of like 80s canon piece. So Donato, for everything that you love about this movie, what does it take to get it there?
It's a hard question because when you look at these 80s slashers and you look back on movies that have been around for a while and have had a time to garner their audience and have not, I mean, I think that is a brilliant question. Why did Chopping Mall get all the glory and why did Death Spa get left behind? I think the Barbara Crampton of it has something to do with Chopping
Mm-hmm.
Mall, if I'm being completely honest. Like, we have picked our icons, we have the actors that we love, and Barbara is one of them. So I think a lot of Barbara's material gets priority over other movies like Death Spa. And again, Ken Foree is in this. Like, there
Yeah.
are major players in here, but Ken is also once again not Barbara. And it's weird to say that. I respect them immensely both, like on the same level. But the majority of horror audiences, they're going to pick one or the other. So I think, how do you get Death Spa out there? In the way that you could write so many pieces about all the things we've talked about Death Spa to this point, I think there's also a real good examination of an entire era of 80s slashers and where things got from Black Christmas and Halloween that were so straightforward to Death Spa. Like, the evolution of scary, straightforward, just super tense, super vicious, to like a joke of itself but taking itself seriously. And I think that's where you find Death Spa at the end of that whole dissertation, and just be like, listen, slashers did get goofy as fuck towards the end. Like, they are just a mockery at points, or a parody, whatever you want to say. But we have good ones still in that bubble, like in that bubble of slashers where they've maybe lost the horror element and they just go for over the top gore and to make you laugh. There are still some great examples because Death Spa is, as we've said, doing it so confidently and doing so earnestly. It wants to be what this is. It's not trying to make fun of slashers and make fun of others of the type. It is doing what it wants within the confines of slashers and doing what it wants in a way that is entertaining the audience immensely. And I think that's the important part. So where does it find its audience? I think you do. You show it in some kind of retrospective with Chopping Mall, with movies like that. Like, find the ones that succeeded on being batshit crazy and you show them all. Like, you're just have some crazy like show with Leanna Quigley's workout video and killer workout. Just have a insane booking of deadly gym horror movies. there's creative ways to go about it, but for the fact that like it hasn't had its audience resurgence yet, that's the bummer. Because like I watched it because it was on Screenbox, it wasn't even Shutter, and like Screenbox was like bragging about getting it, and I was like, you know what, I'll finally get to it. I watched it on Screenbox, I owned it the next day, like literally Amazon overnight. Like that's how that shit went. So I think a lot of people will do the same. You just have to have the right moment and the right selling point to do so, because as horror fans we've all been burned over and over again with however many movies with an insane title. I mean, I'm burned all the time on like a Ouija Geist and shit like that. Like
Yeah.
it's just dumb as fuck. Like Shark Side of the Moon, I will always watch something with that title,
Great
but
title.
90% of the time that movie's gonna suck. And then you finally get one like Death Spa and you're like, this is the one I have to put out there and get to the people. So if I have to do it myself, I'll do it myself, but I know I have at least two more people with me here.
Heather, same question. How does Death Spa find an audience for you?
Well, I agree with everything that Matt has said, and then I will take it in a like slightly different direction in the sense that like one of the main arguments of my book is that to queer people, horror is queer, and that they have a distinctive relationship with horror because they share like transgressive, haunted, uncanny nature with the genre. And one whole chapter is dedicated to insidious queer trauma and what it's like to grow up queer in this world and face trauma every like it's coming at you every day in microaggressions and acute trauma also. So I argue that one of the ways that queer people kind of subvert some of the tenets of horror is that things we have a camp relationship to the genre. So I think as we kind of like going back to our earlier conversation and how the state of cinema going is under threat and it's been very altered and I do worry about where it's going. I think that people should in their communities figure out ways to bring people together. I'm just going to go like straight up with like especially queers, any queers out there listening, gather other queers. And that's just it just needs to be like enough queers in a room. Of course all people are welcome, but we want enough queers in a room to have the tone of the screening be queer. And so I think that Death Spa is a great film that like distinctly like queer embodiment in horror. They share there's like basically aesthetics and transgressive natures encoded queerness in the film. So you can even like you can have like little mini lectures and performances before it. And that's how you can reach people. And I think people don't take enough advantage of community spaces because now it's so easy to actually, like, if you have the DVD or the Blu ray, you can screen things if you make it educational. So maybe I'll like be like, I want there to be like this little cadre of people out there just doing kind of renegade smaller screenings to bring Death Spa to the people.
And if you are a gym out there with a good sense of humor, public screenings of Death Spa.
Oh
Once
my god.
like
Why has that not happened?
I don't know. I don't know. Free idea. I'm in marketing. Somebody can take it. I won't charge you for it. I would go to Planet Fitness on a Tuesday night if
Can
they
you
were
imagine? Oh
projecting.
my god. Yes. Just like
It went. Oh, sorry.
yeah, no, so
Go
just
ahead.
like killer workout and Death Spa on loop. And then with
Yeah.
Linnea Quigley's workout. Those
Yep.
three. Maybe throw in some Jane Fonda just for contextual fun.
Oh yeah, yeah. You got to have a little bit of a palate
Yeah,
cleanser for sure.
exactly.
When we inevitably start our certified forgotten movie series somewhere, it's a goal of mine. I'm going to start that here in LA at some little theater that'll let me show the movies we covered on the podcast. This will absolutely be one of the first ones I show for that reason exactly. Like I
Yeah.
want people to come out, have a good time, and this is that movie. Like this is that movie you put on when you're eating a whole pizza with your friends, beers out, whatever your
Yep.
drink of choice is. Like that's Death Spa. That is exactly the mode you want to be in for this.
Yeah. I dare someone to watch it and not like smile multiple times and laugh out loud. It's like, I mean, I'm sure someone's going to DM me and be like, I watched it and I didn't laugh or smile. But like, I'm like, well, then you need to find some joy because that movie is pure fucking joy.
Well, there you have it. Go watch Death Spa. It's available on Shutter, and I'm sure what is a much better resolution than what I watched on Tubi. I'm going to throw that out there. Also available on Tubi for free if you do not subscribe to Shutter. Strongly recommend pairing this with Down. We had a fun conversation a couple of weeks ago about Down. They're very of a piece type movie, decade apart, but very spiritually kind of, playing in the same sort of general box of 80s horror. And I think that would make for a really good double feature. But for those that want to read the book that we've talked about so much today, Heather, or that want to stay on top of other writing or appearances, seminars, panels, all the good stuff where you may be talking about your research, what are the best social media sites to stay connected with you? Where should they go to stay on top of what you're doing?
As I said before, I don't like to be perceived, so I'm only on Instagram. So it's Queer for Fear on Instagram. But I'm really accessible if people want to DM me, ask questions about screening things, want to know anything more of what I have to say about Death Spa. Like, I'm just trying to think of, like, the biggest horror in Death Spa actually is being served carob coffee. That's the biggest horror in Death Spa. So that's it. Queer for Fear on Instagram. I have I have been on a hiatus. I will be returning from my hiatus sometime soon. I just don't know the exact date, but my work is empirical, and it was based on a massive survey. It's the largest survey in all of horror studies, and I asked people their top 5 favorite horror films. And so when I kind of got rid of duplicates, the list was 4,000. No, I'm sorry, 1,487 films. So I'm slowly watching every single one of them to
Wow.
cement. Like, the whole point of the project is because at the end of the day, it's not about the individual films. It's not about a canon of cinema that is like, this is the queer cinema. It's about the entire genre. So the only way I could do it is like have someone put Babe 2 Pig in the City earnestly next to a Serbian film. So
Not a double feature that we can 100% get behind here on Certified Forgotten.
yeah.
But Heather, what is your preferred place for people to purchase your book, or can they get it at the local library?
They should ask. Probably not. It's an academic book, so it's the University of Chicago is who has it. You can DM me for a discount code. I was just told earlier today by someone who DM'd me that the University of Chicago is currently out of stock. But if you DM me for the code will still be good when it's back in stock. I'm happy. I don't want anyone to pay full price for this book. It's too much money. So please DM me and then request that your library gets it, because I think it's important for the, like, humans who are like me many, many decades ago to have access to something so they can feel seen and understood and know that there's a whole community out there that's just like them in many ways.
I might have set you up with an alley oop there on the library thing. So I'm glad you dunked that down. That's awesome. Donato, you've been writing a lot of reviews for a lot of different places. Where do folks go to stay on top of the quality cinema that you are covering as of late?
Yeah, you can follow me at Donatobomb on Twitter, Letterboxd, and Instagram. Also less on TikTok and Blue Sky, but I'm still there. You can read such reviews as Greedy People, Alien Romulus, anything that's coming out. The Wasp is coming out this week, and that was a delightful little film. So if you're listening to that this weekend, The Wasp is new in theaters, and it's probably my favorite release of this week.
As for me, I'm basically just on Blue Sky, although I pop in every now and then on Twitter just to see what the youths are doing with Prometheus, because that brings me so much fucking joy that is having a weird cultural moment right now. I was right. All y'all were wrong. I'm not too proud to say it. Be sure to follow Certified Forgotten. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, your podcasting platform of choice. Our website, www.certifiedforgotten.com, has some of the best, I'm biased, but I think some of the best original essays about horror films, especially the kind of stuff that you'll like if you like the podcast and if you like underseen horror. And then you can always sign up for our free Patreon tier. Try before you buy, patreon.com/certified forgotten. And you'll get our weekly newsletter, or mostly about every 10 days newsletter. That's on me. But then we'll have, an opportunity to see if you want to continue to support us in whatever directions we may end up going in the future. So that is it. Heather, thank you so much for giving up a chunk of your Wednesday night to join us. This was exactly the conversation I think that we wanted it to be.
Yeah, I've had so much fun talking to you too about this movie. So thank you.
And as we do on every episode, Donato, who has for the last 30 seconds been puzzling over some weird shit to say on the outro, I am vamping to give him a little bit more time until his eyebrows unfurl. I'm almost out of air. Donato, go!
Don't forget your dicep curls.